My daughter-in-law canceled my 60th birthday dinner to fund her parents' Maui trip. Next morning, my office called me boss over speakerphone at breakfast, and her smirk disappeared in real time. "We're calling off the birthday dinner," my daughter-in-law said. She set her coffee mug down on my kitchen table like a gavel. My kitchen table. The one Robert and I bought at an estate sale in 1994, paid $60 for, refinished ourselves in the garage over a weekend when Julian was 5, and thought sanding was the funniest thing anyone had ever done. "My parents are taking a last-minute trip to Maui," Vanessa continued. "Found a beachfront hotel. We promised we'd help cover it." I looked at my son, Julian. He was looking at his phone. "Julian," I said. He cleared his throat, didn't look up. "Mom, it's just dinner. We can do it another time." Just dinner. 2 words. I sat with them for a moment and heard every year inside them. Every school lunch I packed before sunrise. Every Tuesday at 5:45 a.m. with a thermos of coffee and a sandwich assembly line, because Julian had a 12-minute window between bus arrival and first bell. Every tuition installment his father and I paid in 3-month chunks, planned around, made work. Every Christmas I made sure he had more under the tree than we could really afford. Not because we were foolish with money, we were never foolish with money, but because I wanted him to feel abundant, to grow up believing the world was worth participating in. I was turning 60, widowed 2 years. His father had been dead long enough for the acute grief to settle into the chronic kind, and I had spent those 2 years being, I thought, mostly graceful about it. My birthday dinner was just dinner, but Vanessa's parents needed a beachfront suite. Besides, Vanessa added, picking invisible lint off her robe, my robe from the hook in my guest bathroom, the hook I had put there for guests, and which she had silently annexed 2 months into living in my house, as though annexation was something that happened to objects when left undefended. "It's your 60th. It's not like it's a milestone year or anything." I nodded, not because I agreed, not because I was hurt into silence. I nodded because in that moment I understood, with a clarity that had been building for months like water behind a dam, that talking was no longer useful. I stood up, carried my mug to the sink, and rinsed it slowly. Vanessa watched me from the table with a small smirk at the corner of her mouth. It was a practiced smirk. She'd had time to practice it, since she'd been taking small victories in this kitchen for 6 months. She thought my silence was surrender. She had no idea I was already adding numbers in my head. I need to go back to the beginning to explain what she didn't know, because what she didn't know is the whole story. Robert Ashford and I started our firm, Ashford Property Group, boutique commercial real estate, from a borrowed desk in a colleague's office in 1987. We had approximately nothing. We had stubbornness, which I found over the course of my professional life to be worth considerably more than people give it credit for. And we had each other's instincts, which were complementary in the way that good partnerships are. Robert saw opportunity, and I saw structure. And between the two of us, we never once committed to a deal that we hadn't examined from both angles. By the time Julian was in high school, the firm was doing well enough to be comfortable. By the time he graduated college, it was doing well enough to be something. By the time he married Vanessa 3 years ago, Ashford Property Group had 17 employees, a commercial lease portfolio across 4 counties, and a reputation in regional real estate circles that I was, privately, not unproud of. When Robert died, I made a strategic decision that I have since come to understand was both wise and underestimated. I let the world think I'd stepped away from the firm. Not retired. I never said retired. I simply stopped being visible. I stopped attending the networking dinners that Robert had always preferred anyway. I let Marcus Webb, who had been with us for 11 years, who knew the firm as well as anyone, and whose title I quietly changed from Director of Operations to Managing Director, become the public face of day-to-day operations. What I kept, privately, was 80% of the firm's equity, all major decision-making authority, and a phone that Marcus called before any transaction above a certain threshold. I had reasons for the quiet that had nothing to do with grief, though grief was real. After Robert died, I had watched several things happen in my social world. People's behavior toward me changed, based on assumptions they made about my circumstances. The people who assumed I was managing comfortably continued treating me with the respect they'd always had. The people who assumed I was diminished, financially or otherwise, began treating me differently, with a mixture of pity and something else. Something that looked like opportunity when I was being honest with myself about it. I decided to learn which category the people around me fell into before I corrected their assumptions. It was, in professional terms, a due diligence exercise. In personal terms, it was something less neutral than that. Julian brought Vanessa into my house 4 months after Robert's funeral. I want to be fair about this. I invited them. I invited them because the house was large for one person, because I missed having people around, and because Julian had mentioned they were looking at a lease that would cost them $200 a month in a neighborhood they'd chosen because Vanessa liked the coffee shops. I told them they could stay with me while they saved. That was 18 months ago. In the time since, I had learned a great deal about my daughter-in-law's operating assumptions. The first loop started 3 weeks after they moved in, when Vanessa mentioned, in the tone of a person noting a minor domestic fact, that she'd added herself to the streaming services on my account because it was just simpler. I said that was fine. I told myself it was fine. I made a note in a small spiral notebook I keep in my bedside table, the same one I used to record Robert's medication schedules in the last year of his life, which I now use for a different kind of record keeping. The entry read, streaming, no discussion, assumed welcome. The second loop was the groceries. I shopped for myself at Meadowbrook Market, the mid-range grocery chain near the firm firm's office that I passed on the way home. When Julian and Vanessa moved in, I continued shopping there, and the cart naturally expanded in the way carts do when a household grows. What I began noticing, over the course of several months, was the addition of specific items I would not have purchased for myself. The $14 imported olive oil I passed by every week, the artisan bread that cost 3 times what I paid for my own, the specific brand of sparkling water that Vanessa kept 6 bottles of in the refrigerator door. None of these had been discussed. They simply appeared on the conveyor belt of my cart and on my receipt, which I reviewed and filed and noted but did not address. I was still gathering information. The third loop was the utilities. Vanessa worked from home, which I respected. Her career was in social media management, which I understood less well than most, but recognized as legitimate work. What it meant, practically, was that the house ran at a higher level of resource use than it had when I lived alone. Heat sustained at 72 degrees through the morning because she found anything cooler unproductive. Lights on in every room she'd occupied because she moved between them without turning switches. The dishwasher running daily regardless of whether it was full. I calculated the increase at approximately $340 per month against my pre-arrangement utility averages. I noted this. I did not act on it. The fourth loop was the birthday dinner itself, the cancellation, which was the first time the pattern produced something I couldn't categorize as a reasonable household ambiguity or a difference in domestic style. Vanessa set her mug down like a gavel and canceled 60 years of my life with the same energy she used to cancel a streaming trial, and my son looked at his phone and I understood that the observation phase was complete. The fifth loop was the insight I almost missed, that Vanessa had already been making inquiries about me. Not in the way a daughter-in-law makes inquiries about a mother-in-law she wants to understand, in the way a person makes inquiries about a resource they want to map. I found this out from Marcus himself, the day after the birthday dinner cancellation, when I arrived at the office and he met me at the door. "Your daughter-in-law called yesterday," he said. I stopped walking. "Asking what? Whether we had any unused warehouse furniture she could haul away for free." A pause. "She said she was a close friend of the family and wanted to make sure she had the first opportunity before anything was donated." "First opportunity," I said. "Her words," he said. Vanessa had found the firm, which was not a secret. My name was still on the website in the founding partners section, and had been prospecting it for assets before she knew what it was. She was already mining a network she didn't know existed, run entirely by the woman whose birthday dinner she'd redirected to a Maui hotel budget. I shook my head. "Don't give her a thing." "I had already decided that," Marcus said. "Also," I said, "stop the monthly stipend to Julian's car account." Marcus looked at me. "He's 34 years old," I said. "He's been managing a car lease with my assistant since he was 26. That's long enough. I'll process it today," Marcus said. So I should describe Marcus properly because he's important to this story in a specific way. Marcus Webb, 51 years old, had come to the firm straight out of business school and had been, for 11 years, the person I trusted with the firm's operational architecture. He was not a flashy person. He was the kind of man who showed up early, left late, and understood that the unsexy work of running a business was the work that actually kept it alive. When Robert died, he had called me that same week, not with condolences. He'd sent those separately in a handwritten card, but to ask what I needed from him professionally, and what the plan was, and whether there was any decision he should be holding for my review. He had asked these questions not because he lacked initiative, but because he understood that in a moment of transition, the right move was to align rather than assume. He'd been calling me boss since before Robert died. It was not a joke. It was an accurate description of the relationship, delivered in the direct tone we used with each other, and which had never required any more explanation than that. Until the morning, my phone rang at the breakfast table. The morning after the birthday dinner cancellation was a Wednesday. I was at the kitchen table with my newspaper and my coffee. Julian was making eggs. Vanessa came downstairs at 9 in the robe, wrapped her arms around herself visibly, and said, "Taryn, did you turn off the heat? It's freezing upstairs." "Energy prices have gone up," I said, not looking up from the paper. "I have to cut costs, starting today." She opened her mouth. "Since my birthday budget is now covering your parents' hotel," I added, "it seems reasonable that everyone participate in a little household economy. I've set the upstairs thermostat to 64. Her mouth closed, then opened again. My phone rang. The screen lit up on the kitchen table. I'd placed it face up, which I did not usually do, but which I had done that morning because I knew what time Marcus's office calls typically came in. "Marcus, office." I pressed speaker and went back to buttering my toast. "Good morning, boss." Marcus's voice, deep and clear, filled the kitchen. He has a broadcaster's register, a quality I'd noticed at his interview and thought nothing of, but which I've come to appreciate over 11 years of conference calls. "The downtown commercial lease is ready for your signature. The notary's waiting on your green light, and the jet crew needs confirmation within the hour if you're flying out after the meeting." Julian had walked in from the stove during Marcus's first sentence. He stood with his fork frozen halfway to his mouth, the scrambled eggs cooling on it, his face doing the specific recalibration of a man hearing something that doesn't match his current understanding of the room. Vanessa had gone very still, the kind of still that happens when a person is working through a rapid calculation, the kind they don't want visible on their face. "Confirm the crew," I said. "Have the paperwork ready. I'll be in this afternoon." "Yes, ma'am." I ended the call. Set the phone back on the table face down, as I usually kept it. The silence that followed had a specific texture, the texture of two people in a room who have just received information and are deciding what to do with it before they say anything out loud. loud. Julian set his fork down slowly. The egg slid. He didn't notice. "Since when does Marcus call you boss?" Quick pause. "If you want more stories like this in better quality, my Spotify's linked in the description." I looked at him. He was my son, and I loved him, and I had spent 34 years wanting things for him that he had increasingly failed to want for himself, and the fork freezing moment was the most present I'd seen him in a conversation at my kitchen table since they moved in. Not phone-checking present. Actually present. Vanessa let out a sharp laugh, too fast, the kind of laugh that sounds confident and isn't. "It's probably some old inside joke from before he retired. As if your mom is out here signing major corporate contracts and flying around on private jets." I looked at her over the rim of my coffee cup. I did not correct her. I have found, in 50 years of professional and personal life, that it is always more effective to let people sit inside their own assumptions until reality finds the door. Corrections require an audience that is ready to receive them. Vanessa was not, in that moment, ready to receive anything. She had arrived at a conclusion she found comfortable, and she was reinforcing it in real time, and that reinforcement was its own kind of information. I stood, put on my navy wool coat. Vanessa's designer boots were blocking the hallway closet as usual, a habit she'd developed somewhere around week 3 that I had noted and not addressed because I was still in the observation phase. I picked them up and placed them in the darkest corner of the shoe closet. Small things. Boundaries start with small things. "I'll be home for dinner," I said, "though I imagine you'll have sorted out your own arrangements by then, given the household economy situation." I drove to the office. The downtown commercial lease was a significant transaction. I won't go into the specific numbers because specific numbers in commercial real estate are the kind of detail that invites secondary conversations I'm not interested in having publicly, but I will say that it secured the firm's revenue position for a meaningful period forward, and that the counterparty was a national logistics company that had been in conversation with us for 14 months and had made their final decision, partly on the basis of our reputation for stability. The thing I had built with Robert from a borrowed desk over 37 years. I signed the lease at 2:45 p.m. The notary, a woman named Cheryl Hartman, who had been notarizing documents for our firm for 6 years, and who greeted me the way she always greeted me, by name, with the professional warmth of someone who has a consistent and respectful working relationship, waited while I reviewed each page. Marcus sat across the conference table, reading something on his tablet. He looked up when I initialed the final page. "One more thing," he said. "Vanessa Ashford called again this morning. Different inquiry this time. She wanted to know about the firm's property management software, whether we'd considered switching to a product her agency represents." I looked at him. "Her agency represents a software product," he confirmed. "She said she'd noticed the firm's name in her husband's emails and thought she might be able to offer us a deal as a family connection." This was new information. She went through Julian's emails. "That's my interpretation, yes," Marcus said. I sat with that for a moment. Vanessa had found the firm in Julian's email, which meant she'd been reading his email, which meant either Julian had shown her or she'd found it some other way. And given the sequence of events, the prospecting call about furniture, now the software pitch, I understood that what I was dealing with was not casual opportunism, but a pattern with a strategy. She'd discovered the firm existed. She didn't yet understand what the firm was. She was trying to insert herself before she fully understood what she was inserting herself into. "Tell her the firm's software decisions go through our IT committee," I said, "which meets quarterly. The next meeting is in February." It was October. "And forward me any further communication from her to the firm, please." "Already doing that," Marcus said. I flew back on the Cessna that afternoon. A fractional ownership arrangement, not a full private jet, though the distinction was one I saw no reason to correct in Vanessa's mind, and arrived home to find the house empty. Julian had left a note on the table. "Vanessa's at her friend's. I'm at the gym. Be back around 7. There's leftover soup." There was no leftover soup. I made myself an egg on toast and sat at Robert's kitchen table and thought about the conversation I was going to have with my son. The conversation happened on a Saturday morning, 11 days after the birthday dinner cancellation, when Vanessa was at a yoga class. I made coffee. Julian came downstairs with the slightly guarded expression he'd been wearing since the Marcus call, and we sat across from each other. "The car account," he said. "Marcus's office called." "I know," I said. I asked him to close it. Julian wrapped his hands around his coffee mug. He had his father's hands, broad, square at the knuckles, and looking at them still did something to my chest that I expected would never entirely stop. "I didn't know you still had a car account for me." "I know you didn't," I said. "How long?" "Since your first car," I said. I rolled the assistance into a structured transfer every month rather than dealing with direct asks. It was simpler for me. He was quiet for a moment. "What else don't I know?" "A lot," I said, "which is, in part, my failure. I raised you to feel taken care of. I didn't raise you adequately to understand what taking care looked like from the providing end." He looked at his coffee. "Your father and I built something real," I said. "I am still running it. I am not a widow surviving on Social Security and residuals. I own 80% of a firm that closed a significant commercial lease last week, and I fly on a Cessna when it's more efficient than flying commercial, and I have been quietly supplementing your household in ways you were not entirely aware of." He was very still. "The streaming accounts," I said. "The grocery supplementation. I've been buying more than I would buy for myself at every shop. Your father's side of the family holiday gifts, the car account. An insurance top-up I arranged after you switched plans last year and the deductible went up. Mom, I'm not listing these as grievances expenses, I said. I'm listing them as information. You didn't ask for most of this. I provided it because I wanted to, and because it was in my capacity to do so, and because that is what I do. I looked at him steadily. But I need you to understand something. The person Vanessa thinks she's living with, the elderly widow managing on a modest fixed income, is not accurate, and some of the decisions she has been making in this house, and about this household, and about this family's circumstances, are based on that inaccurate picture. Julian set his mug down. What decisions? She called the firm about furniture, I said. She called about a software product she wanted to pitch us. She went through your email to find the connection. He went still in a different way. The way men go still when they understand they've been inside a situation they didn't fully map. She is not aware, I said, that the firm she identified as a prospecting opportunity is the firm that has been, among other things, covering your car lease for 8 years. And she is making those overtures without your knowledge to an organization run by me, which tells me something about how she understands the dynamics of this family. Julian was quiet for a long time. The kitchen clock, the same clock Robert and I bought in 1991, the one with the slightly slow minute hand that he used to adjust every few weeks, and that I've left running slow since he died because I can't bring myself to correct it, ticked in the background. I didn't know about the email, he said finally. I know, I said. I would have said something. I know that too, I said, and I did. Whatever Julian's failures of attention, he had his father's fundamental honesty, and I believed him. What are you going to do? He asked. I'm going to continue running my firm, I said. I'm going to adjust the household arrangements here to reflect current reality rather than the version of reality Vanessa believes she's operating in, and I'm going to give you the opportunity to decide what kind of marriage you're in. He looked at me. A marriage where your wife makes financial inquiries about your family's businesses without your knowledge and frames the cancellation of your mother's birthday dinner as a minor logistical inconvenience is a marriage worth examining, I said. That's not my decision to make, but it is my observation to offer. I stood up, rinsed my mug, and went upstairs to change for the office. The adjustments I made over the following 6 weeks were not dramatic. I want to be precise about this because I think the story of this period is often misunderstood as a revenge narrative, and it was not. It was a recalibration. I stopped buying groceries beyond my own needs. This was not punishment. It was accuracy. I was not a household manager for 2 additional adults who had separate incomes. I was a woman who lived alone in her own house and had guests who were, apparently, under the impression that the guest status was permanent and included catering. The streaming accounts I consolidated to my own. Vanessa discovered this on a Thursday evening and asked me with genuine irritation what had happened to the plan. I explained that I'd simplified my subscriptions. She was welcome to add her own credentials. The thermostat remained at 64 during morning hours when the house's energy use peaked. This was, as I had said, a reasonable response to an increase in household costs that I was absorbing without contribution from the people generating them. It was also worth noting that 64 degrees is not cold. It is the temperature of a pleasant autumn afternoon. Vanessa wore a sweater for 3 days and then stopped mentioning it. The car account remained closed. Julian called Marcus directly to confirm, and Marcus confirmed it with the professional neutrality he brought to everything. Julian did not ask me to reverse it. What I did not do, I did not expose Vanessa's firm calls to Julian in the way she would have exposed them, loudly, in front of people, as a weapon. I told Julian privately. What he did with the information was his decision. What he did? He had a conversation with her. I don't know the content of it. I know it happened because the dynamic in the house shifted afterward. Not dramatically, but in the way that dynamics shift when a foundational assumption has been corrected. Vanessa was quieter. She stopped leaving her boots in the hallway. She started making her own coffee in the mornings and took it upstairs rather than sitting at the kitchen table conducting an audit of my day. The birthday dinner happened 6 weeks after the original cancellation. Julian planned it without asking Vanessa's permission, which was new. He made a reservation at the same restaurant, the one I'd gone to twice with Robert, where the bread comes out warm and the lighting is gentle enough that you can sit for 3 hours without feeling like you're being processed through a dinner. He asked me what I wanted to do for the evening, and I told him I wanted it quiet. Vanessa came. She was polite. She commented once on the restaurant's menu prices, which I recognized as a reflex. The only register she had for displaying discomfort was to make a point about cost. Julian looked at her and said, "Mom's paying," and the subject was closed. I ordered the duck. It was very good. After dessert, Julian gave me a card. Handwritten, which surprised me, because Julian had not been a handwritten card person since his 20s. It said in his particular left-leaning print, "I've been paying more attention. I'm sorry it took this long." I read it twice and put it in my coat pocket. Vanessa watched this exchange with the expression of a woman who is performing composure and finding it somewhat effortful. I thanked them both for coming, and I paid the check, and I drove home in my own car. My birthday was, in the end, a good day. Not because the dinner was a reconciliation, or because things with Vanessa resolved into something comfortable, or because Julian became a different person overnight. He didn't. People don't. What happened was smaller and more durable than that. I stopped pretending, in the domestic space of my own home, to be a version of myself that fit other people's assumptions about what I was. I am a 60-year-old woman who built a firm with her husband from nothing, and who has spent the 2 years since his death quietly managing it, quietly managing herself, and quietly observing what the people around her revealed when they believed she couldn't hear them. Vanessa still lives in my house. This may surprise you. It surprised Marcus when I told him, but I have specific reasons. She and Julian Julian are expecting a child, a fact I learned 3 months after the birthday dinner from Julian directly in my kitchen, where he sat across from me and told me with the mix of nervousness and pride that men carry in that specific announcement. I am going to be a grandmother. The circumstances of my becoming a grandmother include a daughter-in-law who thought she understood my situation and was wrong about it, and a son who needed several decades of protected comfort to develop the attention he's now beginning to pay, and a household that is, slowly and imperfectly, recalibrating towards something more honest.